The Affair of the Vermilion Cipher, Chapter 10, The Final Confrontation, Introduction and Recapitulation. Dear listener, welcome back to this most extraordinary and perilous of investigations. I trust you have recovered sufficiently from the shocking events of our previous chapter, for I fear that what lies ahead will test your nerves even further. Before we plunge once more into the depths of this conspiracy, permit me, indeed compel me, to make a most earnest request. If you have found yourself gripped by this tale, if you have followed Holmes and myself through these many dangers and revelations, I would be deeply grateful if you would subscribe to this channel. Ring that notification bell with all due vigor, dear friend, that you may be immediately alerted when the final chapters of this affair arrive. And if you would be so kind as to favor this video with a like, it would serve to ensure that more such adventures may be brought to your ears in future. Your support, gentle listener, is the lifeblood of these narratives. But come, you did not return merely to hear me speak of such modern conveniences. You returned for the truth, for justice, and for the brilliant mind of Sherlock Holmes as he confronts his most dangerous adversary. So let us resume where we left off. The previous chapter had concluded in circumstances most dire. Holmes's elaborate game of deception had succeeded. After a week of careful manipulation through coded newspaper messages, the mysterious professor had been drawn out of hiding. He had agreed to meet personally at a deserted warehouse in Rotherhithe, believing he was purchasing the stolen key from one of his own agents, but the meeting had turned catastrophic. When the professor entered that shadowy warehouse, he appeared as an elderly gentleman of refinement, cultured, respectable, seemingly harmless. Yet his eyes betrayed the fierce intelligence that marked him as a true criminal mastermind. And when Holmes, in his disguise, attempted to complete the transaction, the professor struck with devastating speed. His walking cane, that seemingly innocent accessory of an aged gentleman, proved to be a weapon of diabolical ingenuity. A squeeze of its handle released a stream of poisonous vapor, some derivative of prussic acid, that caught Holmes upon the neck and shoulder. My friend fell, his nervous system attacked by the toxin, his body racked with paralysis. I arrived too late to prevent the attack, but in time to confront the fleeing professor with my revolver. And there, dear listener, I faced a terrible moral choice. The professor turned to face me, and despite knowing what he was, despite understanding the danger he represented, I found myself unable to shoot what appeared to be a harmless old man. In that moment of hesitation, he escaped into the labyrinth of London streets. I rushed Holmes to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where I supervised his treatment personally. The poison had affected his respiratory system and caused temporary paralysis, but Holmes, ever resilient, began to show signs of recovery within hours. Yet even in his weakened state, his mind continued to work upon the problem. "Bring me the file on academic persons of interest," he had whispered from his hospital bed. I did as he requested, and Holmes identified our adversary at last. Professor Edmund Calloway, formerly of Cambridge University. An expert in Eastern languages and cryptography, he had been dismissed from his position 10 years ago following accusations of academic fraud. But more significant were the notations Holmes had made years prior. Calloway was suspected of having connections to Russian intelligence services. The pattern became clear. Calloway had spent years seeking the Vermilion Cipher, which would give Russia access to every British intelligence agent in Asia. Sir Henry Ashworth had been merely a pawn, a convenient scapegoat in Calloway's larger game. With Lestrade's assistance, I discovered that Calloway owned an estate in Kent, Blackwood Manor, purchased under an assumed name and maintained in complete secrecy. The local villagers described the owner as a reclusive gentleman who rarely ventured out. Holmes, despite my medical objections, insisted we act immediately. Every hour we delay gives Calloway time to discover the key is false and adjust his plans accordingly, he argued. And so, accompanied by Inspector Lestrade and 6 constables, we travelled to Kent. We approached Blackwood Manor with utmost caution, watching as Calloway emerged from the house and walked to a small outbuilding, likely his workshop or laboratory. Now, Holmes whispered, and we three entered the main house while Calloway was thus occupied. In his study, we discovered a wealth of incriminating evidence: letters from Russian intelligence officers, records of payments to agents including Shen Wu, detailed notes on the Vermilion cipher and its location. And there, in Calloway's personal journal, we found documentation of everything: the recruitment of Sir Henry, the theft from Major Ashworth, the entire conspiracy laid bare. But the cipher itself remained hidden. Holmes, employing that remarkable deductive faculty that has served us so well in countless cases, located a hidden compartment behind the bookshelf. Inside, resting on a bed of silk, was the document we had sought for so long: the Vermilion cipher, covered with those strange symbols that held the key to so many lives. "We have it, Watson," Holmes said with quiet satisfaction. "The genuine article this time." But even as he spoke, we heard a sound from the doorway. Professor Calloway stood there, and in his hand was not his walking cane, but a very modern and efficient-looking revolver. "Gentlemen," he said with icy calm, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." And there, dear listener, we stood frozen, caught in a deadly confrontation that would determine not merely our own fates, but the security of the entire empire. What follows in this chapter is the resolution of that terrible moment: the confrontation between Holmes and Calloway, the revelation of yet another conspirator we had not anticipated, a battle in that Georgian manor house that would test us to our very limits, and ultimately, a decision that Holmes would make, a decision about the cipher itself that would surprise even me. Steel yourself, dear friend, for this is the final confrontation. Lives hang in the balance, justice demands satisfaction, and the fate of the Vermilion cipher must be decided once and for all. Let us conclude what we began. For a moment, we stood frozen in a tableau of mutual surprise. Calloway in the doorway with his weapon trained upon us, Holmes with the cipher in his hands, Lestrade and I with our own revolvers still holstered, our hands moving instinctively toward them. "I would advise against it, Doctor Watson, Inspector," Calloway said, his voice perfectly steady. "I am an excellent shot, and at this range I could kill all three of you before you could draw your weapons. Mr. Holmes, please place the cipher back in its box and slide it across the floor to me." "I think not," Holmes replied calmly. "You see, Professor, for I know who you are now, you are caught in a classic dilemma. You can shoot one of us, perhaps even two, but not all three. And even if you could, there are 6 constables positioned in the woods outside. The moment they hear gunfire, they will come running. You cannot escape." "Perhaps not," Calloway agreed, "but I can ensure that the cipher is destroyed before they arrive. If I cannot have it, then no one shall." He shifted his aim to point the revolver directly at the wooden box containing the cipher. "One shot, Mr. Holmes, and decades of intelligence work will be reduced to splinters and ash." "Is that what you want?" Holmes hesitated, and I could see the calculation behind his eyes. Calloway had found the one argument that might give Holmes pause: the threat to destroy the cipher that so many had died to protect. "What do you propose?" Holmes asked carefully. "A simple exchange. You give me the cipher, and I allow you to leave unmolested. I will then depart this country and take the cipher with me to those who will pay handsomely for it. You will have failed in your mission, but at least the cipher will survive, to be used against British interests for decades to come," Holmes observed. "I think not. Professor, your logic is flawed. Even if I believed you would keep your word, which I do not, I could not in good conscience hand over a document that would lead to the deaths of hundreds of innocent people." "Then we are at an impasse," Calloway said, "and if we are at an impasse, I have nothing to lose by destroying the cipher and attempting to fight my way past the constables. At least that way my Russian employers cannot claim I betrayed them." "Russian employers," Holmes repeated. "So you admit your treasonous connection?" "I admit nothing that is not already evident," Calloway replied with a thin smile. "My loyalties ceased to be to Britain the day that country cast me out for the crime of trying to supplement my meager academic salary. They made me what I am. Mr. Holmes, they created their own enemy, a common rationalization of traitors throughout history," Holmes observed. "But ultimately, Professor, it comes down to this: you are one man with a single weapon. And you are surrounded. Your situation is hopeless, perhaps, Calloway said. But I wonder, Mr. Holmes, if you have considered all the possibilities. For instance, what if I am not alone? Even as he spoke, I became aware of a presence behind us. I turned to see a Chinese man standing in the rear doorway of the study, and with a shock of recognition, I realized it was the same man whose photograph Holmes had shown me from the regimental dinner in India. Chen, Holmes said quietly. Of course, you have been with Calloway all along, Mr. Holmes. Chen said with a slight bow, his English perfect but accented. It is an honor to finally meet you. Your reputation has preceded you. I am only sorry that our meeting must end in your death. He too held a weapon. And now Holmes, Lestrade, and I found ourselves caught between two armed enemies. You have been most persistent, Mr. Holmes, Calloway continued, most inconvenient. In fact, you have cost me a valuable agent in Sir Henry Ashworth, disrupted the Black Lotus operation in London, and forced me to accelerate my plans before I was fully prepared. But your interference ends here, Chen. Please relieve these gentlemen of their weapons. Chen moved forward, keeping his revolver trained upon us. With reluctance, I surrendered my weapon, as did Lestrade. Holmes, of course, was unarmed, having never carried a firearm. Now then, Calloway said, his confidence growing as he realized he had gained the upper hand. We shall have that cipher, Mr. Holmes. Place it in the box and slide it to me. Or I shall instruct Chen to shoot Dr. Watson in the leg, a painful wound but not immediately fatal. You will have 10 seconds to comply. 1, 2, 3. Very well, Holmes said, holding up his hand to forestall further counting. He carefully placed the Vermilion cipher back in its wooden box, closed the lid, and slid it across the floor toward Calloway. The professor smiled in triumph and bent to pick up the box. You see how simple that was. Now, if you gentlemen will be so good as to remain exactly where you are while Chen and I make our departure, no one need be hurt. But Holmes had other plans. As Calloway bent down, Holmes's foot shot out, kicking the box away from the professor's reaching hand. In the same instant, Holmes threw himself backward, knocking Lestrade and me to the floor behind a heavy desk. Chaos erupted. Calloway and Chen both fired, their shots splintering the wood of the desk. I heard Lestrade cry out. He had been grazed by one of the bullets, but we were at least momentarily protected by the heavy furniture. The window, Holmes hissed. Signal the constables. I raised myself just enough to see the window and gave 3 sharp whistles. The sound was immediately answered by shouts from outside and the pounding of feet running toward the house. Calloway realized his position was now truly hopeless. Chen, he shouted, destroy the cipher. Burn it. Chen ran to where the wooden box had come to rest against the far wall. He snatched it up and ran toward the fireplace, clearly intending to hurl it into the flames. But he had not reckoned with Holmes's speed and daring. My friend launched himself across the room in a flying tackle, catching Chen around the waist and bringing him crashing to the floor. The wooden box flew from Chen's hands, skidding across the floor toward me. I seized it just as Calloway turned his revolver toward Holmes and Chen, clearly prepared to shoot them both if it would prevent the cipher from being secured. But I had anticipated this, and despite being unarmed, I threw the box with all my strength, not at Calloway but through the window, where it crashed through the glass and fell into the garden below. Get the box, I shouted to the constables who were now pouring into the room, in the garden. Secure it immediately. Calloway's face twisted with rage and desperation. He raised his revolver and took aim at me, and I realized with cold certainty that I was about to die. There was nowhere to take cover, no way to avoid the bullet that was about to end my life. But the shot never came. Instead, a heavy brass candlestick thrown by Lestrade with the last of his strength struck Calloway's arm, causing his shot to go wild. The bullet embedded itself in the ceiling, and before Calloway could recover, Holmes and 2 constables were upon him, wrestling him to the ground. Chen attempted to flee through the rear door but ran directly into 3 more constables who had circled the house. Within moments, both conspirators were in custody, their wrists bound with heavy rope. I rushed to Lestrade's side and examined his wound. The bullet had carved a furrow across his upper arm, painful and bloody but not serious. I bound it quickly with my handkerchief, then joined Holmes in the garden, where the constables had retrieved the wooden box. Holmes opened it with trembling hands, and we both breathed a sigh of relief when we saw that the Vermilion cipher was intact, undamaged by its dramatic flight through the window. "Well done, Watson," Holmes said, gripping my shoulder with genuine feeling. "Your quick thinking saved both the cipher and quite possibly all our lives. I learned from the best," I replied, and I saw a flash of emotion in Holmes's eyes before his usual mask of cool detachment reasserted itself. We returned to the study, where Calloway and Chen sat under heavy guard. The professor looked older now, defeated, the fierce intelligence in his eyes dimmed by the recognition of utter failure. "It is over, Professor," Holmes said quietly. "Your conspiracy has collapsed. Sir Henry Ashworth is dead. Your agent Shen Wu has turned state's evidence. The Black Lotus operation in London has been disrupted, and now you and Chen are in custody. The Vermilion cipher is secure, and the intelligence networks it protects remain intact. You have failed in every particular." "Have I?" Calloway said, and there was something in his tone that made Holmes pause. "You think this ends with me? You think I was the beginning and end of this conspiracy? Mr. Holmes, you disappoint me. I thought you were more perceptive." "What do you mean?" Holmes demanded. "I mean that I was merely one player in a much larger game. The Russians know about the cipher, Mr. Holmes. They know it exists, they know it can be decoded, and they know how valuable it would be. Do you truly think that my arrest will end their interest? There will be others, other attempts, other conspiracies. The cipher will never be safe as long as it exists." "Then perhaps," Holmes said slowly, "it should not exist." He held up the Vermilion cipher, that document for which so many had died, which had driven men to betray their country and their families. "Professor, I am going to offer you a proposition. You are going to hang for treason, that much is certain, but you can choose how you are remembered. You can die as a common traitor, motivated by greed and spite, or you can die as a man who, at the very end, chose to serve his country one final time. What are you suggesting?" Calloway asked warily. "I am suggesting that we destroy the cipher, not just the encoded document but the key as well. We burn them both here and now, and with them we eliminate the threat they pose forever. In exchange, I will testify at your trial that you cooperated fully with the authorities, that you expressed remorse for your actions, and that you assisted in protecting British interests. It will not save your life, but it may allow you to face death with some measure of dignity." Calloway was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching Holmes's face. "You would destroy it? After all the effort to recover it?" "I would. The cipher has caused nothing but suffering and death. Its continued existence poses a perpetual threat. Better that it be destroyed than that it continue to tempt ambitious and unscrupulous men. And the intelligence networks it documents?" Calloway asked. "How will they be protected if the cipher is destroyed?" "They will be reorganized. New protocols established, new methods of communication implemented. It will take time and effort, but it will be done properly, with modern safeguards and precautions. The cipher belongs to a different era. Professor, it is time to let it go." Calloway smiled, and for the first time it was a genuine expression, almost one of relief. "Very well, Mr. Holmes, destroy it. Let my last act be one of redemption, however small." Holmes nodded and walked to the fireplace. He held the cipher over the flames for a moment, then turned to me. "Watson, would you fetch Lieutenant Colonel Forsyth's key from Lestrade? He has been carrying it for safekeeping." I retrieved the bronze key and handed it to Holmes. He held both the cipher and the key in his hands, these objects that had been at the center of so much violence and intrigue, and then, with a gesture of finality, he dropped them both into the fire. We watched in silence as the flames consumed them. The paper of the cipher blackened and curled, the ancient symbols disappearing in smoke and ash. The bronze key glowed red-hot, its intricate engravings melting and deforming until they were unrecognizable. Within minutes, both were gone, reduced to nothing more than ash and twisted metal. "It is done," Holmes said quietly. "The Vermilion cipher is no more." And thus, dear listener, we watched the flames consume them both, the Vermilion cipher and the bronze key. reduced to nothing more than ash and twisted metal within the fireplace of that Georgian study. The document that had driven men to betrayal, to murder, to treason itself was no more. Professor Calloway and Chen lay bound and defeated, their conspiracy shattered, their ambitions reduced to ruin. The cipher they had sought with such determination, with such ruthless calculation, had been destroyed by the very man who had recovered it. Holmes's decision had been swift and certain. Better that the cipher cease to exist than that it continue to tempt ambitious and unscrupulous men for years to come. And Calloway himself, in his final moment of clarity, had agreed. But dear friend, if you believe this to be the end of our tale, you are mistaken. For you see, even as we stood in that study watching the flames die down, even as Lestrade's constables led our prisoners away, there remained questions unanswered. Threads yet loose, shadows that had not yet been brought into the light. Chapter 11 awaits you, and I give you my solemn word. What transpires in that final accounting will reveal truths more disturbing, more complex than the conspiracy we have just unraveled. For the capture of Calloway was not, as we believed, the conclusion of this affair. It was merely the closing of one chapter before an even more dangerous volume opened. The trials must be held. Justice must be satisfied. But what of Major Ashworth, haunted by the brother he was forced to kill? What of the Black Lotus, whose operations we disrupted but did not destroy? And what of the sinister figure whom the captured burglars in Bath spoke of, someone they called the Dragon? Was Calloway truly the mastermind, dear listener? Or was he, like Sir Henry before him, merely another piece on a larger board? I shall not burden you with details that must be experienced in their proper sequence, but I will tell you this. The affair of the Vermilion cipher is not yet concluded. The most shocking revelation, the true architect of this conspiracy, remains yet to be unveiled. If you have journeyed with us this far, if you have endured these dangers and mysteries at our side, then I implore you most earnestly, do not abandon us now when we stand upon the very threshold of the final truth. Subscribe to this channel, dear friend, that you may be notified the instant Chapter 11 arrives. Ring that bell with conviction, for what follows will demand your immediate attention. And if this narrative has proven worthy of your time, favor us with a like upon this video. Such gestures ensure that we may continue to bring these chronicles to your ears. Share this tale with those companions who possess the fortitude for Victorian mysteries and the patience for complex conspiracies, for the conclusion will require both. The trials approach, executions loom, and a new enemy, more dangerous than Calloway ever was, emerges from the shadows of Limehouse. Do you remember the Black Lotus? Do you recall their vow of vengeance? They have not forgotten us, dear listener. And their new leader, this mysterious dragon, has plans that will threaten not just our lives, but the very peace of nations. Chapter 11, resolutions and reflections, but also new dangers, unexpected enemies, and one final confrontation that will test Holmes as he has never been tested before. Coming very soon. Do not miss what comes next, dear friend. For the game, as my friend would say, is far from over. Until we meet again, I remain your faithful chronicler of these extraordinary events, Dr. John H. Watson, MD 221B Baker Street, London Postscriptum. If you have theories about the dragon's identity, or thoughts about Holmes's decision to destroy the cipher, I encourage you to share them in the comments below. Your insights and observations add immeasurably to the enjoyment of these narratives.